On today's Chilling Crimes podcast, we're looking back at the case of John Gardner. I wanted to have sex and I was going to have sex. Those were the very frank words of John Albert Gardner, the man who was described by psychiatrists as someone who does not suffer from a psychotic disorder. He is simply a bad guy who is inordinately interested in young girls. Not only did John have an interest sexually in young girls, he was adamant that after his first conviction he would never leave behind any witnesses. John had a turbulent early life. His home life was certainly dysfunctional. He moved from house to house and had a number of different father figures. He was diagnosed as having ADHD, paranoia and conduct disorder, and as possibly having bipolar. His mother was a psychiatric nurse, and as a teenager John was on lithium and a range of various other types of medication. Despite his difficult upbringing, he had a relatively high IQ and managed to hold down a number of jobs. Ex-girlfriends described John as having an extremely high sex drive. One of his ex-girlfriends found out he cheated on her at least 80 times, but it was only when he turned 21 that it became apparent that he had absolutely no boundaries when it came to sex. The 13-year-old girl who lived in the house beside John had a day off school. He invited her into his home to watch Patch Adams. When inside, he molested her and she was savagely beaten. He was convicted of a lewd act with a child under the age of 14 and was sentenced to 6 years in prison. And after serving his time, he was determined that he would never be caught again. It was the 13th of February 2009. Amber Dubois was on her way to school. Amber thought it was going to be a great day. She was excited that she had $200 and was allowed to buy a pet lamb. Her science project was to raise a baby lamb. She had waited an entire year for that day. When the school called to say Amber never made it to school, her mother instantly knew she had been taken. There was some initial suspicion that Amber's stepfather, Dave, may have been involved. He was the last one who saw Amber that morning. He didn't go to work that day and instead claimed he was doing his taxes. They had issues before and were not speaking for a month before Amber's disappearance. Dave claimed that they made up just the night before. But despite the suspicions, parents from the school saw Amber walking alone to school that day. It did not make sense that if she had been taken that nobody saw anything. There were no clues and no evidence. Her disappearance was a mystery. Amber was still missing when another teenager disappeared a year later in the same area. Chelsea King. The 17-year-old was last seen on the 25th of February 2010. She went for a run at the Rancho Bernardo Community Park in California at 2 p.m. Her parents, Brent and Kelly, saw her the evening before. On the morning of the 25th, Chelsea got up at 6:15 a.m. to attend a peer counselling session before school. When her parents returned home from work at 5:30 p.m. and Chelsea still was not home, they knew there was something wrong. Calls to her phone went unanswered and none of her friends had seen her. As Chelsea had a GPS feature on her phone, her parents were able to trace her phone to the Rancho Bernardo Community Park. They knew it wasn't unusual for her to go there. She was a member of a cross-county team and liked to run to relieve stress. When Brent arrived at the park, he found Amber's BMW with her school-clothes phone and iPod inside. He ran along the running track calling her name, but there was no answer. Just a few days into the investigation, searchers found Chelsea's underwear. Analysis of the semen found on the underwear revealed there was a DNA match to a known sex offender, John Albert Gardner. John was 30 at the time and police traced him to a Mexican restaurant on the 28th of February 2010. On the 2nd of March 2010, a police diving team found Chelsea's body in an isolated area along the south side of Lake Hodges, 10 feet from the waterline. John was charged with her rape and murder. 3 days after John's arraignment for Chelsea's rape and murder, he was ready to cut a deal. He agreed he would lead authorities to Amber's remains if he could avoid the death penalty. Amber's skeletal remains were found in a rural area of northern San Diego County. It was her parents' worst nightmare, especially when police initially confirmed only partial remains had been found. John entered a guilty plea to the rape and murder of Chelsea and Amber. He also pleaded guilty to the attempted rape of another female jogger. Candace said that John attacked her on the same running track as Chelsea. She only escaped when she elbowed him in the nose. After his sentence, John admitted he killed the girls so they would not be able to identify him. He had kidnapped, raped, and stabbed Amber. He claimed he didn't enjoy seeing all the blood, so when he raped Chelsea, he decided to strangle her instead. John is currently serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole and admits that if he is ever released, he will definitely kill again. Amber's mother requested a meeting with John. She wanted to know how he managed to get Amber into his car. He told her he drove past Amber at 7 a.m, rolled down the window and showed her a knife. He told her he also had a gun and things would get a lot worse if she didn't get into the car. Amber asked him if he was kidding. When she realised that he wasn't, she got into the car. He drove for 40 minutes. Amber asked if he could turn on the radio. She wanted to listen to music to block out what was happening. She didn't cry once. She just kept asking him why he was doing it. Amber's mother now helps in the search of other missing girls around the country.